So now it is really my pleasure to introduce this next session. The conference committee works very hard throughout the year to really think through, reflect on what we had done, and plan for what we can do even better. And certainly having keynotes like we did last night and wonderful keynotes that we've had in the past is certainly a very important component of this conference. But one of the things we learned for sure, and we heard from you, was that we can learn and want to learn from our own. We have experts among us. So it is my pleasure to introduce the following three very brave, wonderful individuals who wanted to just take some time to share something special from their experience and knowledge base. So we're going to hear what's called an Ignite session. Three of them. They have a very short window to get their point across, but the people we're going to hear from: The Future of Learning, presented by Shari Kami, Superintendent of Baldwin, and our very, very proud President-elect of AASA, which is truly an honor. The Conscious Equality Framework, a holistic approach to diversity and inclusion, which will be presented by video from Karen Craigs-Milne, the head of Anti-Racism, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and a signature partner of Thought Exchange, and our own Bo Wright, who will take us back to the future, Superintendent Rush Henrietta. So, without further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce my neighbor. She's right next to me in Baldwin School District, Dr. Shari Kami.
One, you don't need to worry. There'll be days like this.
So that is a song by Van Morrison that says, "Did your mama tell you there'd be days like this?" So my question to you is, did your mama tell you there'd be days like this? I like to come to this job from the perspective of a mother and a superintendent. So let me tell you a little bit about Ellie. Ellie is my daughter, and when she was in middle school, we always had these issues about being on time. I don't know if you have that, but we had it every day. And so one morning, I could not be late for work. There was no choice. I gave her the 5-minute warning, the 4-minute warning, the 3-minute warning, the 2-minute warning, the 1-minute warning, and then I left. And I left her home. And she said, "I need to get to school." And so she went into her piggy bank. That was before Lyft and Uber. And she took $60 out of her piggy bank and took a cab to work, to a school to work. She took a cab. And that was because she needed to get there. She wanted to get there. So I introduce you to my middle school, IS 303 in Brooklyn. And I was asked to speak there a couple of years ago about my experience. I walked into the school, and lo and behold, nothing changed. I was able to navigate that building as though I was there yesterday, and I'm telling you, the last time I was in that building was 1974. That was a really long time ago, but nothing changed. And so Seymour Papert, who is the founder, the inventor of the logo language, wrote a book called The Children's Machine, where he compares a medical profession to the teaching profession, and said, if I were in a time machine and I came back 50 years later, 100 years later, 150 years later, could I do my job? And what he says is, if I'm in the medical profession, I'm stumped. Nothing I can do. But if I'm a teacher, I can go right back and start teaching. 1892, the Committee of 10, a lovely, lovely group of gentlemen, I am sure. These are the people who have decided what we teach in high school in 2021. 1892. It's time. It's time to upgrade what we teach. It's time to upgrade how we teach it. Because while they may be lovely gentlemen, if we teach today the way we taught yesterday, we rob our children of the future. And that's our friend John Dewey. So how do we approach learning in such a way that it is updated, that it is for 2021, and it's not 1892 anymore? It's not just the curriculum. It's not just that. It's how we do the curriculum. What kind of opportunities do we engage our kids in to bring it up to date? So if we believe in the why, and I believe in the why, then how could we do school differently? We talk about doing school. How do we do it differently? What changes in those experiences where kids will spend $60 of their own money to get in a cab and get to school because mom left her home all by herself to figure it out on her own? And so in Baldwin, we've done some of that thinking. And we talk about, what does it mean to be future ready? What does school look like? And what do classrooms look like? What do learning spaces look like? We don't call them classrooms anymore because they're the places of learning. What does it mean to be future ready? And these are some pictures of what learning looks like in Baldwin. Now, I don't want to tell you that we've done 100% turnaround, but we are well on our way of redefining what learning looks like. And learning is for the future. It's not for the past. It's not for what we need. It's for what our kids need. And so these are some of the words that we use to make sure that our kids are ready. We use words like future-focused. We use words like inventing and creating. We all know the problem solving and the communicating that has to go on. But this is Baldwin 2035 that was created with a group of thought leaders, and that is how we guide the work that we do. What does the future look like in Baldwin? And for us, the future is 2035. Right now, one of the pieces at our high school, we have 7 academies. And inside those 7 academies, our kids are doing, right? They are AP classes, dual credit classes, but they are kids that are doing internships and externships, and they are practicing those skills in competitions and in exhibitions. So they are transferring that knowledge. My kids in the academies, their attendance is spectacular. And these are not kids that are the kids you think of, right? You can see some of the work they're doing. These are our AP kids. There are kids who struggle. If you want to be in an academy, you're in an academy. Because we understand that in order to get to the exit, to the post-high school, that you need to experience and do and learn what it means. And what we've heard from our kids are, you know, now I know what I do not want to be when I get out of here. But they also learn what they do want to be. And the folks at Northwell Hospital, for example, have said, your kids are unbelievable. They know the language of radiology. They know the language of business. And how did they learn that? It's the combination of the courses they're taking, but the work that they're doing. And they spend almost as much time out of school as they do inside school. So we talk about our kids as producers because what we expect from them is that they are producing something. And I don't mean homework, and I don't mean choosing A, B, C, D on a test. I mean they are actually producing something. We talk a lot about which is more effective. We talk about the game of ping pong and the game of volleyball. So in ping pong, it is student to teacher, teacher to student, and it's one after another. But in volleyball, if you know the game, it's student to student to student to teacher. Student to student to student to teacher. And so we're maximizing the work that our kids are doing, the collaboration our kids are doing, because what we're saying to them is, you need to talk to each other before you come to me. So the modern day learning environment in Baldwin has changed. Our physical structure has changed. Now, our buildings are old. And so what we've been able to do is sort of redecorate from the inside out, and this is what some of our classrooms look like. We went to Google, we went to WeWorks, we went to Mashable, and we said, if we are preparing our kids for the future, what does their future look like? What does the future of work look like? And we redesigned learning spaces to look like their future in work. But we also said, teachers and administrators, the majority, the overwhelming majority, have never done anything but be a student or be a teacher or be an administrator. So if you've never experienced it, how do you know what you're training kids for? And so we started a new program this year called the Educator Residency Program. And in that program, we have pulled 14 teachers from our middle school and our high school, and we have said, you are studying all year long. You are not having your own classes this year. 14 teachers. That's what I'm doing with my federal money. They are working with Harvard's Project Zero. They are working with Ray McNulty in the Successful Practices Network. They are actually going out and interning in business to see what it feels like to work in the world of business. They are shadowing kids to see what that experience feels like for a student to go 40 minutes bell, 40 minutes bell, 40 minutes bell. Here's your homework assignment. These are our residents, and each of those residents is attached to 5 fellows. So they are going to go into the buildings, they are going to rewrite curriculum, they are going to work with fellows in their buildings, and they, from the inside out, are going to change the experience for our kids, because it's ultimately all about the experience for our kids. Bottom right is our professional learning lab. This is where our teachers are learning. So how do you expect them to change the way kids learn if you don't give them that experience themselves? So how do we know it's working? June of 2021, my graduation rate was 98%. 98%. And my advanced Regents diploma, 70%. And my AP courses, I have over 900 kids taking AP courses, even more in dual credit courses. How do I know it's working? I will tell you the most frustrating piece of this is having to live in this bifurcated world, right? I'm living in the world of Regents and I'm living in the future, and that is not easy. But here are some of the comments that our kids and our teachers are making. I'm excited to learn. Like, isn't that what you want to hear every single day? I'm excited to learn. I'm happy to spend $60 of my own money to get into a car service to go all the way to middle school. That's the feedback that we're getting. This is a dream come true. My teachers who are pulled out of a classroom for a year or 2 years feel like they're floating on cloud 9 because they've never had this opportunity. So what I want to impress upon you is to have the courage to give more of the experiences that Ellie had. So this is Ellie today. She graduated high school. She went on to University of Michigan. Go Blue. Sorry, Ohio State, but you know, we're a Michigan family. And she spent 4 years overseas just doing cool things, and now she's in law school. So her experience has really guided the work that we're doing in Baldwin. So I encourage you to have the courage to do things differently, because it's not about us and it's not about our past, it's about their future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shari. That was outstanding. And now, unfortunately, due to COVID restrictions, travel from Canada is still limited. So Karen Craig's Mill, and as I introduced earlier, is based in Canada. And we wanted her to still be able to participate in this Ignite session. So this is the one thing we are going to have to do virtually. So I turn the video over to Karen Craig's Mill.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, and I'm so glad to be here with all of you. I understand that this is one of your first gatherings since we started opening up, and it's a moment to reflect on all the successes you've had and all the amazing potential work that you're going to be doing, as well as reflecting on where we can do better. So today we're talking about a conscious equality approach, and the first of the 4 quadrants in conscious equality is parity and representation. Now, most organizations think about diversity and inclusion work from that perspective. So they're looking at who's missing around the table from a number perspective. So what is the quota? What are the number of Black leaders in leadership roles? How many women superintendents do we have, etc.? And while this is an important piece to the DEI framework, it's not enough. So you could have people of color in different roles within your organization at different levels, but we need to make sure that we have that representation at leadership and all other levels. And we need to make sure that the strategies that we're using move beyond just representation, because if I'm at the table, but the other people at the table don't appreciate my voice or my perspective, it's going to be setting me up for failure. And as you'll notice with all these different quadrants, there are strategies that are specific to those quadrants, but there are also risks involved. And so the more people that you put into positions of representing a particular group of people, the more you're going to potentially create a situation where you have tokenism, or where individuals receive backlash because the system is not ready for them. They're not welcoming. Now, the second quadrant that we want to look at is called unique needs and barriers. So, over and above the few individuals that end up in the system as a result of affirmative action, we want to look at all the different diverse groups within your system and what are the specific barriers and needs that impact those different groups. So perhaps you have 2 or 3 people in leadership who are women, who are Black, who are Indigenous, who are LGBTQS. There is an entire community within your other levels within the system who are diverse and who have specific needs. You have working women, you have teenage mothers, you have LGBTQIS, you have people with different abilities, and you want to look at all elements of your system from the perspective of, are we meeting the unique needs of each of these different groups? And have we addressed the barriers that are affecting their access into our system and their ability to promote or move forward or complete studies within that system? So the piece here around needs is very important, and we can think of it as equity. Equity really is about fairness, not sameness. Whereas, the first part of the quadrant was really about sameness. And so, in the concept of fairness here, we're asking the questions, what are specifically unique to you? And what are the actions we can take to help address those? And strategies related to that are, specific target group consultations, creating policies and strategies that address the needs and perspectives of unique groups. But even if you were able to address both diversity and the needs that different groups have, you wouldn't achieve equality until you had other elements in place. And another one that's really important, in fact, it's a larger piece of the framework, is social transformation. Social transformation is really, if you think of an iceberg, the first 2 quadrants that we talked about would be at the top of the iceberg. There are things you can see and measure, but social transformation is all the work that happens underneath the iceberg that creates conditions for success, so that that individual who is in a leadership role and maybe a Black person or maybe LGBTQI, they are in a situation where the conditions help them succeed. So social transformation looks at things like, are we teaching about human rights in the education system? Are we teaching about empowerment? Are we helping, people understand that human rights and values and dignity and respect are core to what it means to be able to realize your potential? Are we working with those around the table for that individual leader to be supportive and to have an understanding of their privilege and their power? And so this really is about the power dynamics and the work that we need to do underground. It's a longer term project. It takes more work, and it's often seen as an optional nice to do. We didn't quite get to it because it's hard to measure. But even if you did those 3 quadrants of work, another piece that's super important and one that I've seen show up over and over again is anticipating the unanticipated outcomes of the strategies that you've put in place. So everything that we do, if you think of society as connected as a spider web, then everything that we do over here has an impact over here. And so if I'm trying to promote women, but I have a community that doesn't believe in women's rights, there's going to be backlash against the women that have been promoted. If I want to promote affirmative action for different groups of people of color, then those who feel like they're losing out are going to also express that in forms of backlash. And so we have to anticipate that every time we're taking 2 steps forward, how is this going to land on other groups? What kind of harm could potentially arise to the individuals that we're trying to support through affirmative action, through equity measures? So what are we not anticipating? What do we need to think about? And more importantly, when that happens, what is our strategy to protect people? And part of the strategy is actually the social transformation piece. So how are we engaging with the community? How are we engaging with the white population that may not be comfortable with talking about issues of race? How are we engaging with the non-Indigenous individuals who, are really affected by conversations about colonization and their role within that? What are we doing to help them see the investment that we're putting in and why it's not a loss to them, it's a benefit to them for us to do this work? And so, a holistic approach to DE&I looks at all 4 of these quadrants. It looks at parity and representation. It looks at unique needs and barriers. It addresses social transformation work. And it also says, where are the risks in the work that we're doing that we are causing through our work because good intentions are not enough? And how are we putting into place strategies to reduce that risk or to ensure that people are not subject to further harm as a result of the work we're doing in DE&I? And I would say that most organizations fall under the top two brackets. Because they're easy to do, they're faster, they don't really address the underlying power dimensions, and they don't often anticipate further down the road what is the harm that we created that we need to actually address through additional corrective measures. But when you apply a holistic framework like this, it enables you to identify, what are our strengths in our DE&I strategy? What are we doing well? What have we gotten right in this quadrant, and where do we need to do more work? What are those elements that we haven't really thought about in our approach to this work, and what are the strategies that we could roll out to support that? So that's very important. And the caveat here is this is simply me presenting a new perspective on a way to work. So there may be things you'd want to add to that framework, another level perhaps, or different ways of thinking about it. But hopefully there's something here for you that you'll find valuable. Now, I've offered 3 questions for you to consider as you take that framework back to your organizations and teams. The first one is, where does our current work fit within this framework? Are we doing a lot of equity hiring? Have we done enough social transformation work or not? These are questions you can ask. The other one is, does the framework reveal any potential gaps for us? And if yes, what are the implications for not addressing these? A great example of that is when we focus a lot around Black Lives Matter and hiring, diverse candidates, but we haven't done enough on the intersectional aspects of oppression and lack of representation and needs. And so how are we bringing that intersectional lens? How are we looking at other issues like accessibility and neurodiversity as part of our work in DE&I? And the last question, of course, is what additional areas of focus and actions would facilitate irreversible sustainable change in our education sector? So what additional areas, if we're doing all of these things and we're making progress, what are we missing? What are we not thinking about that would make a difference? And sometimes that work actually involves going back to check, almost like a feedback loop, to check that we introduced this policy. Did it work? Did it make a difference? And what do we need to do or correct or adjust? It's been such a pleasure to spend this time with you. Thank you so much. Please connect with me if you have more questions. I know that there was an article also shared in the newsletter that comes out with this community. So have a look at the article and reach out on LinkedIn. Thank you so much.
So we thank Karen as well as our signature partner, Thought Exchange, that brought that to us. And finally, last but certainly not least, our own Bo Wright, Superintendent Rush Henrietta, who will take us back to the future.
All right, good morning. Well, my name is Bo Wright, proud superintendent of the Rush Henrietta Central School District, which is located in the greater Rochester region of the state. It's so good to be here in person. Before I get into the presentation, I just need to say this. This is the first time, and probably the only time in my life, I got to choose walk-up music. And here I am coming up to Huey Lewis and the News. I love me some Huey, but that just doesn't necessarily feel right. So hopefully when the presentation's over, I can maybe walk down to something that's a little bit more hype. But we had to stay with the theme. The theme for this morning is Back to the Future. That's our theme for the year in Rush Henrietta. And I've got to give credit where credit is due. The idea for Back to the Future came from my assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction, Ms. Dina Wilson. She's not here today, but you can see her in that picture dressed as Doc Brown. And it starts with the notion that we need to reconnect to our purpose on the technical side, grounding ourselves in those practices which have been good for kids on the heartfelt side, getting back to our sense of moral purpose. I love this scene from the movie. I love this slide. I actually lifted it from our team during Leadership Week. I feel like it embodies what happened in spring of 2020. We hit 88 miles an hour in a hurry. We saw some stuff. We've been at warp speed ever since, and I think we have to acknowledge the impact that that has on the work that we do as superintendents in a high-pressure environment right now. So we're supporting students within a very different paradigm, and I think that we have learned some lessons throughout the course of the pandemic. One of them being that the equity issues that our kids face are very real, and we need to be doing more as a school system to remove barriers so that all of our kids can be successful. We also learned that technology is great, but it can't replace a good teacher. A computer can never do that. And a computer can never serve as a substitute for quality human interaction. So we're in the process of going through a shift. We've been operating in survival mode for quite a long time now. We've been focused on health and safety, which we should be. We've been focused on trying to reopen our schools, but now we're to a point where we need to get back to the business of teaching and learning, the fundamentals of good instruction. We have some challenges ahead of us. I'm talking about those, but I think we need to really embrace the opportunities that are in front of us as well, because we have a true opportunity to rethink and reimagine what education looks like in New York State. So you've got some really smart people like the folks from NWEA that are looking at schools that work, schools that are considered high-growth schools. And so these are some of the attributes of those type of schools. Starts with effective leadership. All you folks in this room are building leaders, developing invitational schools with strong family ties, student-centered environments. We're going to be talking a lot about the importance of voice and choice. High professional capacity, meaning everybody in the organization functions at a really high level, and access to rigorous instruction. You've also got folks from Apple and Google who are looking at the future of education and making predictions that our classrooms are going to much more closely mirror what we see in the workplace. Connected environments as far as technology goes, opportunities for students to lead teams and be a part of teams, to work collaboratively, personalized learning which focuses on differentiation, as well as opportunities for students to engage in creative problem solving. So you remember this scene from the end of the movie? Yeah? Doc Brown, Marty McFly, his girlfriend, they're in the DeLorean. Marty looks at Doc and says, "Doc, we don't have enough road to get to 88 miles an hour. Doc looks back at him and says, "Roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads." And I feel like this is where we are as an educational system. We're sometimes trapped within that old paradigm, but we need to understand we're headed toward uncharted territory. So as we reimagine, we redefine, and we reinvent, it often is helpful to anchor ourselves in text to help ground the work. In Rush Henrietta, we're working with 2 books right now. One is Leading the Rebound, really practical strategies for helping students to transition back to full-time school, and then also doing a lot of work around culturally responsive teaching in the brain. That is hands down the best book that I've seen in terms of connecting brain science to the implementation of culturally responsive curriculum. So we're anchoring into what matters most in RH. And we have a very specific focus on 3 areas. One is quality first instruction, as I mentioned, getting back to the business of teaching and learning. Supporting staff and students from a wellness perspective. I'm also chair of the wellness committee, so that's very important to me. And last but not least, really focusing on equity. We call this our umbrella priority, because we believe that if we get that right, then everything else falls in place. When we're talking about quality first instruction, I want to highlight 3 specific areas up on the screen. One is establishing clear learning targets. Taking the guesswork out of what students need to get from a lesson, being very, very intentional about our use of time. Smart formative assessment, using our interim assessments so that we can make instructional shifts to better support students in real time. And then lastly, our implementation of culturally relevant curriculum so that students can see themselves in all of our daily lessons. There's also an opportunity for us to be innovative and to think outside of the box. And so one of the things we're focused on is connecting the physical spaces in our buildings and in our classrooms to the types of instruction that we want to see happening in a classroom. Technology-rich environments, flexible workspaces that allow for collaboration. We're focused on moving students from dependent learners to independent learners, which is something that Dr. Hammond speaks about in her book quite frequently, and making sure that students have voice and choice in what we're doing. We're also rethinking our assessment framework. So using multiple measures to allow students to show what they know, moving to a much more restorative grading policy, getting away from those punitive measures, holding everybody in the organization accountable for student growth. It's much easier to do that. Poverty does not correlate to student growth in the same way that performance does. You may remember this scene as well at the end of the movie where Marty goes on a Van Halen-like guitar riff that kind of leaves everybody with their mouths hanging open, and he says, "I guess you guys weren't ready for that yet, but your kids are going to love it." I feel the same way about assessment and instructional shifts that we're trying to make. Who are the resistors? It's the adults within our organization. Our kids are ready for independence, flexibility, and as I said, voice and choice. We're also looking at supporting students and staff from a wellness perspective. I think we have to acknowledge that this has been a traumatic 18 months, and so we have to continue to support one another. We have to continue to support our kids. In Rush Henrietta, we've been focused on our use of restorative practices, specifically the use of community building circles and social emotional learning lessons. We use circles a lot, even with the adults in our organization. Our Board of Education, our bus drivers, always a lot of drama happening down at the transportation center. And we're also very, very proud of our community partnerships. I'm going to use this to take the opportunity to give a shameless plug for a session that my team, raise your hand over there, Team RH, yeah. Rock stars. They're going to be presenting with Dr. Lavelle Brown from Ithaca, Dr. Oliver Robinson from Shenendehowa, the Diversity Commission. We're really proud of this initiative. It was a community equity initiative. But if you want to learn more about the equity journey, you got to come to the session, man. It's been a really difficult year for districts trying to advance equity work because people want to make this into a political conversation. It's not. It's just about doing the right thing for kids. In RH, we are unapologetic about equity. It's a moral imperative for us. So we made it clear. This is going to continue to be a district priority. We are going to continue to implement culturally relevant curriculum. We're going to continue to develop invitational schools, and we're going to continue to focus on closing the achievement gap because we are committed to making sure that all of our kids in Rush Henrietta are successful, period. Keep it about the work, man. People want to make this into a political conversation. It just isn't. Barack Obama used to talk about the fierce urgency of now related to equity. So as district leaders, we need to keep equity at the core in terms of our decision-making process. We need to make sure that we're preparing this next generation of leaders because they've got some pretty complex issues in front of them. But as this generation of leaders, the folks in this room, we need to stay connected to the struggles of others. We have a moral obligation to address the injustices of our time. In leadership coaching, we oftentimes talk about the privilege of leadership. No question about it. This is probably the hardest time to be a superintendent. But I have a renewed sense of gratitude to be able to sit in this seat, to be able to be a part of this organization, because every morning when my feet hit the floor, man, I know what it's about. It's about helping kids and improving communities. And so as hard as it's been, remember this is when leadership matters most. I'm going to leave you with some words of wisdom from our friend Doc Brown, who said, your future hasn't been written yet. No one's has. Your future is whatever you make it, so make it a good one. Let us commit ourselves to reimagining and reinventing what education looks like in New York State so that we can change the stars for all the kids in New York State. I thank you for your time and attention. I hope that you have a great conference, and I hope that you have a great year.
Well, that was amazing. Thank you so much. A very special thank you in particular to Bo and Shari. Again, it takes courage to get up here in front of your colleagues, but I'm sure that everyone in this room has something they can share. So begin to think now, because we're coming for you. I promise you that.